The mic was never supposed to be on. Not the stage mic, the tiny one clipped to a jacket, the kind that keeps rolling when everyone thinks the night is already over. That's why this feels different. It doesn't sound like PR, it sounds like a mistake, the kind that accidentally tells the truth. Picture the studio after taping the Kelly Clarkson show. The audience is gone, seats are empty. Crew members are tired, rolling cables like they've done it 1,000 times. The bright lights fade into that softer, wrap-it-up glow. Blake Shelton is still sitting there, not scrolling, not chatting, just still, like his body forgot how to stand up. And Kelly notices, because Kelly always notices the thing nobody else wants to look at. Here's the angle people miss. This wasn't just Blake having a moment. This was a room built for performance turning into a confessional. And the only reason you're hearing about it is because one person in the back didn't hit mute fast enough. According to him, the mics weren't off. They were idling. Quiet until they weren't. At first, you hear nothing. Then a chair creaks. Fabric shifts. And Blake lets out a breath that sounds like a man dropping a heavy bag he's carried for years. He doesn't start with drama. He starts with honesty. "I can't do this anymore." Not shouted, said the way you say it to yourself when you're finally done lying. Kelly sits down beside him. No cameras pointed at them now. No audience to entertain. Just two people and a studio that suddenly feels too big. Blake tries to laugh it off, but it's that hollow laugh you recognize instantly. The one that says, "If I don't joke, I'm going to break." And then, according to the sound guy, Blake says the line that makes your chest tighten. "She hates the dirt. She hates the quiet. I don't recognize myself anymore." That's not a petty complaint. That's identity unraveling. A man saying, "I'm living in someone else's world, and I'm disappearing in it." Right here, the sound guy says he reached for the mute button, not because it was juicy, because it felt wrong to listen, like overhearing someone cry in a locked car. But his hand froze, because Kelly didn't jump in with advice. She didn't perform empathy. She just stayed quiet and let Blake talk. Blake talks about Los Angeles like it's a costume he can't take off. He says every day feels like a show, even when there's no show, like he's always on, always smiling, always explaining himself. Then he says he tried to bring up Oklahoma. Not forever at first, just weekends, summers, a split life, anything. But the answer, according to him, was always the same. No, LA is home now. Oklahoma is a visit. The dirt is inconvenient. The quiet is boring. Blake goes silent for a beat, like he's hearing his own words for the first time. Like he's realizing he's been bargaining for a life he shouldn't have to bargain for. He rubs his face. You can hear the scratch of his palm against his beard. "I don't know who I am out here," he says. And that's when Kelly finally speaks, soft and steady. She tells him some places don't judge you. They don't need you to sparkle. They don't demand you turn pain into a punchline. Some places just let you breathe. That sentence lands. Blake doesn't answer. He folds forward, head in his hands. He cries, not loud, quiet crying, the kind you do when you're trying to be respectful to your own sadness. Kelly doesn't turn it into a speech. She puts an arm around him and lets the silence do the work. And then something starts buzzing on the desk. A phone. Again and again. The name on the screen, according to the sound guy, is Gwen. Blake looks at it, silences it, sets it face down. It buzzes again. He silences it again. There's a strange violence in that small action. Not hate, just choosing not to step back into the life that's pulling at him while he's falling apart. So let's say the question out loud. Was it guilt? Was it fear? Or was it the first moment Blake admitted he couldn't keep living two lives without losing himself? Because that's what it looks like. A man cracking open while the life he built keeps calling him back. And here's why Kelly matters in this scene. Kelly knows what it's like to smile through something that's breaking you. She knows the private cost of being fine in public. So she doesn't push him. She just stays there like, "Yeah, I get it." The sound guy says there's one detail he can't shake. Between the sobs, Blake whispers that he misses mornings where the loudest thing is wind. He misses being bored. He misses being nobody. And then, almost like a reflex, he murmurs a line under his breath, the kind you sing when you're trying to calm down. "Country roads, take me home." Not a performance, a lifeline. Kelly, barely audible, hums a few words too, like she's meeting him where he is, "Since you've been gone." And Blake lets out this tiny, broken laugh, like the universe just proved a point. But here's the part that flips the story. The sound guy says he didn't share it for attention. He held it for years. He didn't replay it. He tried to forget it. Until fans started turning every relationship into a war. Team this, team that. Like love is a sport and heartbreak is entertainment. And that night wasn't entertainment. It was a man saying he felt lost. So he tells it now because he wants you to understand something. Sometimes the end doesn't start with cheating. Sometimes it starts with a whisper. Because after the crying slowed down, after the phone stopped buzzing, Blake said something that didn't sound like anger. It sounded like clarity. I think I stayed too long because I didn't want to be the bad guy. That's different. That's not, I don't love her. That's, I don't want to hurt anyone. And those two things don't always line up the way people think they do. You can love someone deeply and still feel like you're shrinking inside the... You can want the marriage to work and still feel your identity slipping through your fingers. That's what makes this messy. There's no villain here. Just a man who feels split in half. The producer says Blake talked about trying to adapt. He tried liking the noise, tried leaning into the Hollywood rhythm, tried convincing himself that peace was overrated, that quiet was just nostalgia, that growing up means outgrowing where you came from. But the body doesn't lie. He said he'd wake up tense, jaw tight, shoulders stiff, like he was bracing for something even on days when nothing was wrong. That's not drama. That's misalignment. Kelly didn't interrupt. She just asked one question. When do you feel calm? And Blake didn't even hesitate. Back there. 2 words. That's it. Oklahoma. The ranch. The early mornings. The dirt Gwen reportedly called inconvenient. The silence she found boring. The very things he described like oxygen. And here's where it gets complicated. Because loving someone who doesn't love the same life you do creates a quiet war. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just small compromises stacking up until one person feels like they're living someone else's dream. Blake admitted he started measuring his days differently. Not by success, not by ratings, not by applause. By how long he could go without feeling like he was pretending. That's heavy. The producer says Kelly leaned back and told him something that probably hit harder than any lyric ever could. Peace isn't selfish. That sentence stayed in the room. Because a lot of people think choosing your own peace means you failed at love. That if you walk away, it means you didn't try hard enough. That if you go home alone, you're giving up. But what if staying was the thing that was slowly breaking him? Blake talked about how fans see the highlight reel, the sweet posts, the blended worlds, the laughter. And he said something that makes you rethink everything. They see the weekends, they don't see the weekdays. Weekends are easy. Weekends are curated. Weekends are boots in the mud and cute photos and songs around a fire. Weekdays are different. Weekdays are where real life sits. And if your weekdays feel wrong, the weekends can't save you forever. The producer says there was a long pause after that. Just the hum of studio equipment and the distant clank of someone loading gear into a truck outside. Blake picked up his phone again, looked at Gwen's name. This time he didn't silence it immediately. He just stared, and he said quietly, almost like he was confessing something to himself, I don't think she's wrong. I think we just want different futures. That's the line that changes the tone. Because now this isn't about dirt versus city, it's about direction. 2 people walking at slightly different angles until the gap becomes visible. You don't notice it at first. You're still holding hands, still smiling, still telling yourselves it's fine. But over time, that angle widens. And one day you look up and realize you're not walking the same path anymore. Kelly, according to the producer, shared a piece of her own truth in that moment. Not as advice, just as recognition. She said sometimes you outgrow the version of yourself that made the relationship work in the first place. That doesn't erase the love. It just means the season changed. Blake didn't argue. He didn't defend. He didn't blame. He just nodded. And that nod felt final. Then he said something else, something softer. I miss who I am when nobody's watching. That's the core of it. Not fame fatigue, not marriage drama. Identity. Who are you when the lights go off? Who are you when there's no audience clapping? Who are you when you don't have to be charming or strong or put together? Blake in that moment sounded like a man who wanted to go back to the version of himself that didn't require maintenance. The producer says the studio felt smaller somehow, like the air thickened, like everyone who had left had taken noise with them, leaving only truth behind. Blake finally stood up. He wiped his face, took a breath, picked up his phone, and before he walked out, he said the line that still echoes. If I go back, I'm going back for real. Not a visit. Not a break. For real. That's not a threat. That's a decision forming. Now here's where you come in. Because it's easy to sit back and turn this into a celebrity storyline. To ask, are they splitting? Is this the end? Who messed up? But that night wasn't about scandal. It was about a man admitting he felt disconnected from himself. And if you've ever stayed somewhere too long because you didn't want to disappoint anyone, you know exactly what that feels like. The producer says he finally muted the channel after Blake walked out. He didn't keep the audio as leverage. He kept it as a reminder that even the biggest personalities, the loudest laughs, the strongest public couples have moments where they sit in a quiet room and whisper, I don't recognize myself anymore. And that's honesty. Whether Blake and Gwen work it out or not almost becomes secondary in this version of the story, because the real turning point wasn't a fight. It was a sentence spoken into a mic that wasn't supposed to be on. A sentence about not knowing who you are in the life you're living. So maybe the bigger question isn't whether he answers the phone next time it rings. Maybe it's this. If you finally hear yourself say, "I can't do this anymore," do you hang up on your truth counts? Or do you follow it all the way home? There's one more piece to that night that almost nobody talks about. Not the crying, not the phone buzzing, not even the, "I can't do this anymore." It's what happened after Blake walked out of that studio. The producer says he didn't rush, didn't storm off, didn't slam a door. He walked slow, like someone carrying a decision that hadn't been fully spoken yet. And that's what makes this feel real, because big life changes don't usually start with explosions. They start with quiet resolve. A slow shift in posture, a different way of breathing, a new tone when you talk about the future. Blake stepped outside into the Los Angeles night. City air, car lights, noise that never really sleeps. And the producer swears there was this moment where Blake just stood there, looking up at nothing in particular, like he was measuring the sky. You ever do that? Look up and realize the sky feels different depending on where you are. He pulled out his phone again. This time, no buzz, no vibration. Just a lock screen reflecting his face back at him. And the producer says Blake didn't look angry. He looked tired. Not tired like he needed sleep. Tired like he needed alignment. That's a different kind of exhaustion. Inside the studio, Kelly stayed seated for a few seconds after he left, quiet, thoughtful. The producer says she didn't look shocked. She looked like someone who recognized a crossroads when she saw one. Because here's the truth most people skip over. Kelly's story wasn't loud at first either. She smiled, she worked, she showed up. Until one day, the split was public and everyone acted surprised. But the real work of that ending happened in private. In conversations, in late nights, in small admissions that felt too heavy to say out loud at first. So when Blake said, "If I go back, I'm going back for real," Kelly didn't flinch. She understood that tone. It's the tone of someone who has already started leaving in their heart. Now fast forward a little. Blake does go back to Oklahoma more often. Longer stretches, fewer LA appearances, more mornings on the ranch, more distance that isn't explained, just felt. And here's where the angle shifts again. Maybe this wasn't about choosing against Gwen. Maybe it was about choosing toward himself. Because when a person feels lost, they don't always need a new partner. Sometimes they need their old environment, the place where they remember who they were before expectations layered on top. The ranch isn't just land, it's memory. It's a version of Blake that existed before Hollywood, before The Voice, before red carpets and blended celebrity worlds. And if that version felt more authentic, more grounded, more him, then going back isn't running, it's returning. But here's the part that still stings. Love doesn't automatically survive return. If Gwen's rhythm is built around creativity, city energy, constant motion, and Blake's nervous system calms in wide open silence, you've got two different definitions of peace. And peace is personal. You can't negotiate peace forever. Eventually, one person feels compromised, and compromise slowly turns into resentment if it's one-sided. There's no evidence of screaming matches. No public betrayal. Just a pattern. Distance, less shared visibility, more separate presence. And that's what makes this story harder to digest, because it forces you to admit something uncomfortable. Sometimes good people grow in different directions. And it doesn't mean the love was fake. It means the alignment shifted. The producer says he almost deleted the audio that night, almost convinced himself it wasn't his business. But something about it stayed with him, not because it was shocking, because it was human. A man saying he doesn't recognize himself. That hits deeper than gossip. Now zoom out for a second. Imagine you're Blake. You built a massive career. You found love after heartbreak. You blended two worlds that seemed impossible to blend. And for a while, it worked. But then small cracks form. Not dramatic cracks, just subtle misfits. You start craving mornings without noise. You start feeling like the version of you people celebrate isn't the version you feel inside. And every time you try to explain it, it sounds ungrateful. So you stop explaining. You start visiting home more. You start imagining what life would look like if you didn't have to perform. And one night, in a quiet studio, you finally say the words you've been swallowing for months. "I can't do this anymore." That sentence doesn't automatically mean divorce. It means awareness. It means something isn't sustainable. And once awareness shows up, you can't unsee it. So where does that leave the marriage? Maybe in conversation. Maybe in counseling. Maybe in slow separation. Or maybe in a quiet rebuilding nobody sees yet. The producer never claims to know what happened after. He just knows what he heard. And what he heard wasn't bitterness. It was longing. Longing for space. For dirt. for silence, for identity. And that longing doesn't disappear because a phone keeps ringing. Now here's the question that actually matters. If you were in that studio, if you heard a man admit he felt lost in his own life, would you judge him for wanting to go home? Or would you understand? Because this story isn't really about celebrity. It's about alignment. It's about the courage it takes to admit that the life you built might not fit anymore. And that maybe the bravest move isn't staying for the image. It's walking toward the place that lets you breathe. Blake standing under the L.A. sky that night, phone in hand, eyes tired. That's not a villain. That's a crossroads. And crossroads don't promise easy answers. They just force decisions. So now the story sits in that space between rumor and reality. Between love and identity. Between city lights and open fields. And you're left with one final thought that refuses to go away. If the mic had been off, if no one ever heard him say he felt lost, would he still be slowly finding his way back home?